If you ask what language a marriage speaks, people say love, or patience, or compromise. Mine spoke punctuation. I'm a forensic linguist, part research professor, part consultant to platforms that want to know whether the person threatening a school is the same as the person threatening a congresswoman. Part advisor to attorneys who need to prove an unsigned letter was written by the man denying it. My students joke that I can tell you who you are by how you place a comma. It isn't that mystical. We develop habits when we write tiny bones under skin you forget are there. You can fake a voice, but you drag your own grammar like a broken net. My wife, June, is an architect who restores buildings that nearly died. She has hands that know where rot likes to be polite, and she uses words the way my grandmother used thread sparingly, beautifully, mostly to keep things from falling apart. We met in a gallery at a fundraiser neither of us could afford. The wine tasted like an apology. She pushed her hair behind her ear and said the word joist, like it was a charm. I said corpus, and she didn't flinch. We married a year later in a courthouse with bad lighting and a judge who made us say I do like he invented it. The winter it changed. Our city was a study in grayscale. I taught mornings and consulted nights. June took a contract to resurrect the Maple Street Library, a brick box that had been gutted by fire and then left to rot because the city didn't know whether to mourn books or money. She loved the project like it had asked for her specifically. She carried the blueprints like bread. My work, when it isn't courtroom theater, is hours in front of screens that glow with threats and lies. A platform paid me to build a model that could tell whether a suicide note was likely written by the account's owner or stitched together by a troll who wanted to watch a town burn. You can't do that job and stay entirely kind. You start hearing the way friends use the EM dash and guessing their sleep schedules. June and I texted like people who live in the same house and love the same days but don't intersect in time zones. She used full words and proper punctuation even when running. She wrote cannot, not can't, email, not email. She used the Oxford comma like a coat that fit. Her signature move was a small space before a question mark, a hangover from the French CAD software she learned on. I used too many M dashes and apologized with dots. The first anomaly was small. She texted from the library site while I was proctoring midterms. Can you grab garlic? No space before the question mark. I stared at the absence like you stare at a friend who arrives without their shadow. Midterm adrenaline makes you stupid. I told myself she had typed it on a contractor's phone. I bought garlic. A week later, she sent a photograph. A winter sun bleeding through a burned window frame. Look at this light, it said, lowercased, without the Juneness of capitals and caution. She never wrote, look. She wrote, see. She would have said, this light makes me want to apologize to paint. She would never have said, look, without making both of us smile at the bluntness. I saved the photo and told myself you are a husband, not an algorithm. Then I did what I do when I don't trust myself. I made a folder called Maple, June, and dropped the anomaly inside it like a feather I was pretending not to weigh. You can make an enemy out of a spreadsheet if you feed it your life. Days got busy. My students started copying each other's ellipses. The platform wanted to know urgently why one account had shifted from semicolons to periods overnight. Answer, a PR team. And June came home smelling like soot, wood glue, and something like rain that isn't water. At night, we sat hip to hip and drew on our tablets. We touched often and spoke less. When she slept, she made small thunder noises in her throat that made me want to put a palm there and feel her alive under it. The second anomaly was a word she would never use, anyways. I was walking between buildings. My phone hiccuped in my pocket. I'm at the library till late anyways. June is a person who would rather say, in any case, than shift a sentence around with duct tape. I wrote back, okay, be safe. Then I sat on a bench under a dead tree and listened to the city failing at being spring. The sentence thumped around in my ribcage like a bird. This is the part where you tell me I should have asked her. That's reasonable. But I was a man whose job was knowing. I stood up and walked into knowing like it was a room in my house. Stylometry is not magic. It is math you teach to be humble. Feed it enough of a writer's sentences and it will learn their heartbeat. How long they pause, how wide their steps are, how they refuse a synonym. When I work a case, I build a control corpus 10,000 to 50,000 words of the target in different moods and months, then build masks text that looks like the target but isn't. The model learns where the bones are. I did not build a model for my wife. I told myself I was being ethical. Instead, I did the cheap version. I exported our last year of messages. I focused on small function words. And, but, the, that, which, the parts nobody edits for. I made a scatter plot of sentence length distributions and pronoun preferences. June, for as long as I've known her, prefers we to I and avoids that like a superstition, choosing which, even when it isn't strictly correct. The last 3 months, that had been invited back to the house. We had gotten thinner. I closed the laptop like it had asked me to. I went to the Maple Street Library with a paper bag of egg sandwiches, because that is how you tell a woman you will stop being a detective. The site smelled like damp books and ghosts. June stood on scaffolding with a hard hat and the kind of beauty you only get by loving the thing that makes you filthy. Down on the ground, a man was talking to her with his head tilted like he thought he could coax a building. He wore a Department of Fire logo on his jacket, and his posture said, "I am someone's danger and someone else's safety." When he noticed me, he smiled the smile men wear into houses where they don't live. He stuck out a hand. "Row," he said. "Fire investigator." He had the kind of voice that reads public statements when a town has burned and needs a father without permission. He didn't hold my handshake too long. He didn't look at June like I wasn't there. He existed in a way that made my chest tighten. We ate on the steps of the library with our feet in the heat that stones hoard for late afternoons. Roe talked about the way flame leaves its handwriting on walls. June talked shop, and when she did that, her mouth did a tiny sideways reach, like her lips wanted to see each other more often. I watched her speak the word delaminate more tenderly than she had said love in weeks. I told myself that's how work looks when it is saving you. On the walk home, I said what normal men say when they're reading weather too hard. "Roe seems good at what he does," June said. "He listens the way buildings want you to," and then laughed at herself for being a person who would say that out loud. We made pasta. She fell asleep on my shoulder to a documentary about bridges. I watched the credits and wrote the word anyways on a small piece of paper and put it in my wallet the way people keep saints. The next anomaly wasn't a text. It was an email. June never emailed me for anything domestic. She despised the use of work tools for love. "Get milk?" came from her work account at 5:11 p.m. Subject line empty, body lowercase, period missing. I answered, "Sure." Then, in a fit of pettiness even I can't disguise as science, I sent, "Okay?" in a message of my own from an alias I use for spam, to see whether she would space the punctuation like herself. She wrote back, "Who is this?" I closed the alias and hated the man I was becoming so much, I had to take a shower to feel like skin was still a good idea. I stopped measuring for a week. We made love once, and it felt like a conversation between cousins who had been close as children and then grown careful. She fell asleep face down, and my hand hovered over the wing of her shoulder blade like I might glue it back if I found the right pressure. The next morning, she left a note on the counter. "Back late tonight. They're pouring the mezzanine." She had used her exact sentence shape. The note smelled like pencil and orange peel. I put my cheek on it like a fool. The day it broke, I was on campus, teaching the undergraduates that very is a word people use when they don't have the courage to find another word. A storm rolled in and announced itself on our windows like a man with no sense of timing. After class, my phone buzzed with a text from June. "Come by after work? The light is—" And then nothing, as if an EM dash had interrupted her to remind her how to breathe. I went to the library. The rain made the plywood sing. In the reading room, the high windows bloomed with a grayness that makes cameras the only truth. June stood with a tripod pointed at the wall. Rose stood beside her, not touching, not. The air did that thing air does when it remembers how close to water it is. "Hey," June said, like I was a person who should be here. Ro nodded. "We found something in the south wall," he said. "Old scorch marks behind new plaster. Not this fire. A secret that waited 80 years. He showed me a photo on his phone. A dark curl like a fingerprint. Written on the studs in pencil. A thin, careful hand. Anyways, it was a good life. My stomach laughed in the wrong place. I said, "Who writes anyways in 1938? Ro grinned. "Midwesterners," he said. "And drunks." June looked at me with a question I had taught her to think, but not to love. We stood there in a triangle that could have been a geometry lesson if it didn't involve breath. We got coffee at the cart that parks outside construction sites and sells courage under the name Latte. Ro got called away to a small fire, the way weather calls sailors by their last names. June and I sat on the wet steps. "There's something you need to tell me," I said, "because despite hating speeches, sometimes I am a man who gives one." She watched me the way she watches beams checking for load. "Yes," she said, which is a dangerous kindness. "I should have told you sooner." I waited for names. I got a story about breath. "After the fire," she said, meaning our loss last year we still can't name. "I needed a room where grief wasn't the furniture. The library is that room. Ro." She put her fingers to her eyes like she could tighten a lens. "He listens in a way that doesn't require me to narrate myself." "And you kissed him," I said, not a question, a mercy that hurts. She was brave. "Yes." "Worked," I said. "Past tense." She shook her head once. "Also present." Rain found the back of my neck. I didn't move. "How long?" I asked. "Since March," she said. "That's all the months," I said, because sometimes I narrate like a bad poet when the machine in me breaks. She reached for my hand, and I performed the trick of not moving it. "It's not about him," she said, dutiful as a student. "It's about me." "Of course," I said, which was kinder in tone than content. A truck splashed past and apologized too late. I licked the rain that reached my mouth like a dog and said, "I'm going to ask a thing you have every right not to answer. Did you ever text me as someone else?" She flinched, barely. Her hands remembered truth faster than her face. "He used my phone once," she said quickly, "to show me a video. Maybe I—" The thing about men like me is we can make an affidavit out of dust. I stood up too fast and the world tilted like a set. "I am asking something simpler," I said. "Did you let him edit you?" She closed her eyes. "Yes." We went home like people returning from court. In our kitchen, among the oranges and the garlic I had been buying like a superstition, we did the inventory. I named the things that made me a bad husband, my arrogance about knowing, my habit of treating the person I share a bed with like a paragraph I could fix. She named the things that made her a bad wife, her addiction to rooms where she is necessary, her willingness to let a stranger's cadence hold her weight. We cried with our backs to each other because that's how you afford crying sometimes. We separated for a month. 1 bedroom into 2. June stayed in our place. I moved into the spare office at the linguistics department and pretended the cleaning staff didn't know. At night, I slept on a couch that smelled like other people's coffee and dreamed in lowercase. In the day, I did my job too well. A lawyer sent me a stack of messages and asked me to tell her which ones her client's ex had forged. I told her the ex had taught herself his commas. "We can fake empathy," I wrote in my report, "but we struggle to fake boredom." It made her call me to say I was cruel and useful. I received an email from a platform administrator. "Can your model detect when two people are co-authoring a single account?" I typed yes and didn't send it. June sent me a photograph of the mezzanine pouring. "You'd like the sound," she wrote, "like a city heartbeat." I typed back and deleted. She sent another message an hour later. "I want to talk without defending myself." I said, "Me too." We met at midnight in the library because people in love and trouble are always going to pick the sacredest inconvenient place and call it honest. The site was asleep. The mezzanine slab cured under blankets like a cake afraid of draft. We walked with our phone lights and our caution. It was snowing so quietly outside that inside the quiet felt louder. "I ended it," she said. "No ceremony, no speech. With him." I looked at the floor we were standing on because it was less dramatic than looking at her mouth. "Because of optics?" I asked. "Because of me?" She shook her head. "Because I want to stop borrowing other people's pronunciation to say my own name." It was a good sentence. It almost made me want to forgive her for being able to say it. We leaned against a wall that would one day hold stacks of children's books. "You could have said, 'I love him,'" I said. She nodded. "I could have," she said. An ambulance moaned across town. It sounded like grammar. "I won't be noble," I said. "I'm not asking to be the bigger person. I'm asking to be the person with you or not." She touched my elbow like a woman who knows how to get a stranger across ice. "With," she said, "if you want me there." We tried. Our trying had rules. No lies, no stylometry, no heroics. I deleted the Maple Got June folder after printing one page and setting it on fire in the sink, which was theatrical and satisfied a small idiot in me I'm embarrassed to admit exists. June stopped sleeping at the library. Roe stopped being a noun in our house. Forgiveness is not a staircase. It's a field of wet grass you cross with bad shoes. Some days are gentle, some days you slip and pretend you did it for exercise. One afternoon, a notification popped on my phone from the platform's admin panel, a beta feature I had built and forgotten to mute. Co-authorship detected at account, a Maple builds. I stared and almost laughed. It was the library's public account, captioning progress. June. We're sealing the mortar today, which means we're basically giving the building lips again. A second voice underneath. Anyways, here we go. I wrote code at 2 a.m. to stop the system from telling me when the person I loved had been written by a committee. I wrote an email to the team saying the feature was not ready for policy. I didn't tell June. This is my confession within the confession. I kept a small model running in my head. I fed it less. It ate anyway. The opening was a civic ceremony. The mayor mispronounced Corbell. The ribbon was teal instead of red because some donor had a brand team, and the city showed up with their children to touch a building as if it might purr. June wore a dress the color of brick and a hard hat for the stage photographs because she is not sentimental about hair where safety is involved. I stood in the back with the firefighters and the custodians and felt rightful, the place where the competent people stand who do not need credit to inhale. After the speeches, the doors opened. The library smelled like paper forgiven for almost becoming smoke. Kids ran like water in a basin that had missed them. June stood beside the south wall where the old scorch marks had been preserved behind glass, a plaque nearby with the penciled sentence, "Anyways, it was a good life." People took pictures. Roe came in late, stood at the edge like a man invited to a wedding he wasn't sure he should attend. June looked at him. He looked at her. Then they both looked at their shoes. That's how you know two people were honest and decided to stay honest. He came over. "Congratulations," he said to both of us. His voice had one less ounce of thunder in it. He looked tired in a way that made me like him more. He extended a hand. I took it. The world did not fall. He said, "You did right by the bones." It took me a second to realize he meant the building, and then another to realize he also meant me. We went home and ate leftovers on the floor because chairs felt too formal for a day when a city had gotten a library back. After, June took a shower long enough to make the mirrors honest. I stood in the doorway with a towel the way husbands do when they want to be helpful and ruin it. She stepped out and pressed her wet forehead to my chest and said, "I didn't know how to talk to you without sounding like a person you were analyzing." "I don't need you to perform," I said. "I need you to misuse commas in front of me and let me love you anyway." She laughed and didn't correct herself. We went to bed and touched with a caution that felt like reverence. She fell asleep with her hand on my ribs like they were a shelf she had measured twice. In the months since, there have been small proofs and small failures. She texted anyway once, and then sent a second message with the SS removed like a superstition. I wrote "cannot" one evening, and she sent me a photo of a crow with the caption, "You're showing off." Rose sent a Christmas card with a drawing of a hydrant. He signed it with his last name only, as if brevity is a virtue he had earned. We are not saints. We are not even done with this. Sometimes I think about the folder I deleted. Sometimes she thinks about the rain. But the house we have is a language we can both speak again without copying anyone else's accent. Last week, a student of mine asked if it's true that the machine can always tell who wrote what. I told her the truth I charge clients for. The closer two people get, the harder it is. Love bleeds. She looked disappointed by the romance of the answer, then grateful. After class, I walked to the library alone. The south wall was basking in late light like something warm-blooded. The pencil sentence behind glass looked less like a clue and more like a blessing. I sat at a table and listened to pages. The room spoke a language we were teaching ourselves to hear. When I got home, there was a note on the counter in June's hand. "Back late final inspection at the row house. Do we have garlic?" The space before the dash was hers. The question mark hung the way she leaves it, just slightly outside the word's gravity. I put the note to my cheek because I am learning to be a person who doesn't need models to trust. I walked to the corner store. The clerk asked if I wanted whole heads or pre-peeled. "Whole," I said, because I want things that make me work. On my way back, the sky did that thing where it was both evening and another day trying its luck. I looked up the way June does when she decides a building deserves to be better than before. My phone buzzed. A text. "See you soon." Capital S. No space before the period. Wrong, right, hours. I didn't analyze it. I put it in my pocket like a warm stone and let the syntax be quiet. That is my confession. My wife cheated. She let another man's sentences hold her up while she remembered her own spine. I cheated too, with the machine in my head that wants everything to be classifiable. We have decided to betray those betrayals by being ordinary. Notes on a counter, garlic, a library that almost burned and then did not. If you need a rule, here's mine. Learned late and printed on a card in my wallet over the saint of lost causes. Divorce your diagnostic voice from your kitchen voice. Don't analyze your beloved in the room where you eat. If you're the one who wandered into another person's grammar to survive a season, walk back into your own with both hands empty. Knock. Wait. When they open, speak wrong. Let them love you in your errors. Tonight, when June comes home, we'll cook something that takes longer than the hunger does. We'll lean our shoulders into each other in that ridiculous domestic geometry that makes sense only to the people in it. When we sit, I'll ask her how the inspection went, and she'll tell me in sentences that betray her love of beams. I'll use an M- badly on purpose. She'll pretend not to notice. The house will listen and decline to analyze, because that is how a good house keeps its people, If you made it to the end of this story, thank you. It means a lot. New stories like this one are posted every single day, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss one. And if this story touched you, please give it a like. It really helps more people find our content.